First story. My daughter bullied a girl with cancer. I made my daughter apologize and told the girl to move on. But she cried, made a speech at school, and caused my daughter to get bullied. So I confronted the girl's mom to stop her daughter, and said her daughter deserved the cancer for her sins. Now I'm regretting it. I F45 have a 12-year-old daughter, Mia. She's in 7th grade, and has been in the same class with this girl, Lily, since elementary school. They were never close, but they'd hung out in groups a few times. Mia has 2 close friends, Kayla and Zoe, and the 3 of them do everything together. They're smart, well-behaved girls who sometimes have their little preteen drama, but they're not cruel. My husband and I have raised Mia in a conservative, Christian household. Actions have consequences. We live with accountability. About 3 months ago, word started spreading that Lily had cancer. Some kind of bone cancer. I later learned it was osteosarcoma. I was sorry to hear it. Nobody wants to hear a child is sick, and I told Mia to be kind if she ever needed to be. But Lily's mother, let's call her Samantha, has always had a certain air about her. She's younger than most of us in the parent circle, maybe in her early 30s, a single mother, no judgment, and tends to talk to other moms like she's the only one doing life right. We've had our share of minor tensions in the past. One time a few years ago, she made a snarky remark about how people who send their kids to church school are just dodging real parenting. I sent my daughter to a private Christian school before middle school. She also once accused Zoe's mom, my friend Sarah, of being passive-aggressive at a PTA meeting. She's one of those mums who speaks like she's never wrong. I've kept a polite distance since. Now fast forward to this year. Lily comes back to school after being out for weeks. She's bald. She's wearing a hoodie most days. I don't say this with any judgment. I understand chemotherapy is a difficult process. But I could tell from Mia's tone that Lily had started acting different. Dramatic, attention-seeking. Mia told me Lily would loudly tell teachers she was too tired to participate. That she'd say, "This chemo fog," like it was a punchline. That she'd get mad if someone didn't offer to carry her backpack. One day, Mia said Lily cried in class because someone moved her chair without asking. She wasn't being bullied, she was just touchy. And everyone had to walk on eggshells. Now, I don't excuse meanness. But girls that age aren't saints. They talk. They joke. They're blunt. And sometimes they get it wrong. Apparently, Mia and her friends made some jokes, sarcastic comments about how chemo must be fun, or calling Lily cue-ball in a text thread. I didn't know about any of this until Samantha contacted us. I got an angry email from her saying Mia had bullied her daughter, and that she was demanding an apology. She copied Zoe and Kayla's mums too. At first, I was defensive. I asked Mia directly what happened. She admitted they'd made some jokes, and said she didn't think it would hurt Lily since everyone's always talking about how brave she is. I told her that was not acceptable. I told her that having a Christian heart means being kind even when others are hard to like. So yes, I did ask Mia to write an apology letter. I sat down with her and read it. She said she was sorry for being insensitive, and that she understood now that Lily was going through something serious. I thought that was the end of it. But Samantha wasn't done. She emailed again, saying she'd spoken to a pediatric oncology doctor at the hospital, and thought it would be a great learning opportunity for the girls to come visit the cancer ward. That seeing the treatment rooms, Roman 4 drips, and the kids battling cancer would help them build compassion and understanding. She framed it like an optional thing, but her tone made it clear she expected us to say yes. I was stunned. Absolutely not. I am not sending my daughter or any 12-year-old girl to walk through a hospital oncology ward like it's some field trip. That's not education. That's trauma tourism. I told Samantha, politely, that I appreciated the thought, but I didn't think it was appropriate for Mia. She didn't take it well. She replied, saying that Lily lives in that trauma, and my daughter can't handle one afternoon in it. She said that our kids need to see what real strength looks like. At that point, I'd had enough. I told her that I believe in boundaries. That yes, my daughter did something wrong, and she apologized. But that does not give Samantha the right to push emotional guilt trips onto my family. And here's where I'll be honest, and I don't care if people judge me for it. I do believe that diseases, especially ones that come out of nowhere like this, can sometimes be spiritual consequences. Not punishments in the fire and brimstone sense, but signs, warnings, consequences for brokenness in the family, bitterness, moral failings, even generational issues. It's not something I would ever say to someone's face, but in my heart, I believe it. I've seen it too many times to think otherwise. And I'm not the only one. My husband agrees. So do the other 2 moms. One of them said she felt Samantha had been acting like a martyr for years, and maybe this whole situation is breaking down that illusion. I didn't say that, but I didn't disagree. What really pushed me over the edge was when Samantha said in a follow-up message that the apology letters weren't enough, that the hospital visit would help rebuild Lily's trust in people. Excuse me. Our daughters are 12. They are not emotional support animals for her kid. That's when I told her, as firmly and respectfully as I could, that I wouldn't be allowing Mia to go. That we had already taken the matter seriously and addressed it in our home. She read the message and never replied. But apparently, she's been complaining to other parents that the girls aren't being held accountable. I found out she even talked to the school counselor about it, trying to arrange something through the school. Now I'm being painted as the cruel, closed-minded mom who thinks her daughter is above remorse. I don't think that at all. Mia understands what she did, and she's had consequences at home. But I still think sending kids into a pediatric cancer ward is inappropriate. And yes, I believe that what's happening in Lily's life might be part of a larger spiritual reality that isn't ours to fix. We can pray for her. We can be kind. But we don't owe Samantha, our daughter, emotional labor. After that, tension around school pickup got obvious. Samantha wouldn't look at us. Once, she was talking to another mum and lowered her voice when I walked by. 2 days later, Zoe's mum heard through her daughter that Lily told people Mia and her friends laughed at kids with cancer, and that their parents don't care about sick people because they're religious. That was never said. But at this point, Samantha wasn't trying to resolve anything. She wanted shame. She wanted our kids to feel guilty long term, like they owed constant proof of empathy. I met with the other 2 mothers. We agreed the situation was spiraling beyond what was reasonable. We decided as a group that none of our daughters would attend anything involving hospital visits, group discussions, or feeling circles about Lily. They apologized. They got punished at home. Enough. Samantha later sent one more group message, saying that kids who hurt others should take responsibility, and that shielding them from consequences keeps them shallow. She said she wanted to give them insight, not punishment. She said she thought seeing other sick children would wake them up. I didn't reply because there was no way to answer without escalating. Since then, Lily has had surgery. We heard she had limb salvage surgery, and my daughter said Lily is now using crutches. Mia said kids try to help her, but Lily snaps at people now. It sounds like she's carrying anger, and maybe looking for people to blame beyond her illness. I do feel bad she's suffering. I pray for her healing. But I don't believe exposing our girls to a ward full of children in pain is what God wants, especially when the motive felt more like forcing guilt than teaching compassion. I was raised to believe trials are either tests or consequences. If they're tests, they grow you. If there are consequences, they warn you. Either way, they belong to the person or family enduring them, not random outsiders who get dragged into it. We don't know what goes on in that home spiritually. Maybe it's generational sin. Maybe bitterness. Maybe pride. It's not our place to declare it, but we can observe and understand suffering isn't random. My husband said we already handled our responsibility. Mia understands she hurt someone, and we addressed it. We're not going to make her carry a burden that isn't hers. She isn't going to view herself as someone who now has to pay off guilt by performing empathy on cue. But now I'm wondering if people will say I'm heartless for believing illness can be tied to deeper spiritual things, or for refusing to make my daughter emotionally involved in something beyond the initial apology. Our family believes in sin, consequence, and redemption, but not theatrical guilt displays. One of the mums suggested I post here since she said people will probably say I'm evil. But at least I'd get an outside perspective. I know how the internet works. People see sick child and immediately assume anyone who doesn't fully submit is a villain. But I'm being honest. I'm not pretending to reconsider. I'm not open to changing my decision. I'm just asking whether refusing this hospital visit and holding to my beliefs makes me an all-by-standard social view. So here it is. Ada for refusing to let my daughter go on a hospital visit after she already apologized, and for believing that what happened to that girl isn't our responsibility to fix, and may be spiritually consequential. Comments. Comment 1. YTA. This post genuinely pissed me off. You keep repeating that your daughter apologized, but what you really wanted was to shut this whole thing down as quickly as possible without your kid learning anything uncomfortable. I'm not saying a hospital visit is mandatory penance, but your kid was actively mocking someone for having cancer. Bald jokes. Chemo jokes. That's not just a mistake, that's cruelty. And the fact that she thought it was okay tells me she's hearing crap like this at home. You keep talking about spiritual consequences like you're a prophet. Your beliefs don't make you a better person. They sure as hell don't give you the right to suggest a 12-year-old getting cancer is punishment for generational sin. You said it in your heart. But the way your whole post is dripping with judgment towards that girl and her mum makes it clear you're not hiding it well. You're raising your daughter to believe empathy ends when it's inconvenient. Congrats, you've ensured the next generation stays as cold and self-righteous as the last. Comment 2. YTA. And you're hiding cruelty behind religion. You act like your daughter's behavior was just some kids being kids moment, when it was actually pointed cruelty at a child actively fighting for her life. Baldness jokes at a chemo patient. Really? Your daughter didn't stumble into insensitivity, she mocked someone's trauma. And instead of addressing the deeper issue why your daughter lacks empathy, you slapped a Bible verse on it and called it a day. Then there's the part where you call the hospital visit trauma tourism. It wasn't a random ward visit for fun. It was suggested by a doctor as an educational experience to teach compassion. But you refused because you didn't want your daughter to feel bad. Sorry, but discomfort is sometimes part of growing emotionally. Also, that sickness comes from sin line? That's not spiritual belief. That's a scare tactic used to avoid acknowledging suffering exists randomly. You basically said the girl is spiritually tainted. If someone said your daughter got hit by a car because God was punishing your parenting, would you accept that quietly? You're raising a kid to believe suffering equals guilt, and kindness is optional if you pray about it afterwards. Gross. Comment 3. YTA. Look, I actually agree that making kids walk through a pediatric oncology unit might be too heavy, especially if they're not emotionally prepared. That actual decision. Fine. Reasonable parents could disagree on that. But holy crap, everything else you said makes you the arsehole by a wide margin. You downplayed Lily's pain as dramatic. You said her needing help or getting tired was attention-seeking. You believed your daughter after she mocked a cancer patient, but assumed the sick girl was just being overly sensitive. You fully believe her illness is possibly a punishment for her family's sins. You feel zero empathy, even while acknowledging she's recovering from major surgery. You keep saying your daughter learned her lesson, but never described any lesson beyond, don't get caught being mean. You're not raising your daughter to be kind, you're raising her to act nice enough to avoid consequences while secretly judging others as sinful when they suffer. You don't want your kid to feel guilt, not because guilt is unhealthy, but because you don't think people like Lily deserve her empathy. That's not just YTA territory, that's a moral red flag. Update. I figured I'd update, since everything escalated beyond what I expected or wanted. First off, no, I didn't change my mind about the hospital visit. I wasn't expecting the fallout to keep snowballing, but it did. About 2 weeks after I posted, the school counselor called me in for a meeting. Not just me, Kayla and Zoe's parents too. They said they'd received concerns from Lily's mother and from a few other staff members who were disturbed by the bullying situation and the lack of follow-up. They kept using the phrase restorative experience, which is apparently the school's way of saying they want our daughters to engage in something emotionally corrective. They brought up the hospital visit again. I repeated what I said before. I didn't think that was appropriate for kids this age. But they were already moving in another direction. They said Lily was going to speak at an upcoming assembly for Cancer Awareness Month, and that she had expressed interest in sharing her story. I asked directly, is she going to name names? They said no, but also admitted they couldn't stop her from alluding to classmates who mocked her. I told them this felt like a setup. They denied that, but I wasn't convinced. That same week, something shifted. Zoe's mom, who had previously supported me, suddenly flipped. Out of nowhere, she posted this long message in the parent group chat thanking those who were helping their daughters truly learn from this experience, and said her daughter would be sending Lily a personal apology letter and attending the school's hospital outreach Zoom. I called her privately, and she told me she'd had a change of heart. She said her pastor spoke about the cruelty of pride, and it hit her that she hadn't made Zoe own up to the pain she caused. She told me that maybe our daughters should feel uncomfortable. I hung up feeling completely blindsided. Then came the assembly. Lily walked up on stage with her crutches, wearing a scarf over her head and a hospital ID band still on her wrist. She gave a short speech about her diagnosis, how chemo affected her, and her surgery, and then said word for word, some people at school made fun of me for being bald. Said I was being dramatic. It broke me for a while. But I forgave them because I had to. That was all it took. Mia told me afterwards that kids in the audience turned to look at her. Some didn't even bother to whisper. One kid muttered, "Hope it was worth it, cancer hater." After that day, Mia's life at school turned upside down. Her lunch table got weird. She wasn't invited to Zoe's sleepover. Kayla stopped texting. A girl in gym called her Bully Barbie. A boy who used to joke with her suddenly said, "I don't talk to people who mock cancer kids." Mia cried for 2 hours that night. She said she hated going to school. She even asked if we could move. The final blow came from someone I never expected, our pastor. He requested a meeting. I thought it was church business, but he sat down with a Bible and said he was troubled by some things. He said he'd heard from a few members that I'd been speaking about Lily's illness as a spiritual consequence. I didn't name names, but apparently, word got out. He said, "Be careful not to confuse discernment with judgment. You may believe in spiritual cause and effect, but you don't know what God is doing in that family." I asked him if he thought we were wrong for not sending Mia to the hospital. He said, "That's your call. But what your daughter learns from this will shape her forever. She's not just watching Lily, she's watching you." That hit me hard. A few days later, a parent in our circle told me Lily had taken a turn. The limb salvage surgery had complications. They were now considering amputation. She might lose the leg. I didn't gloat. I didn't think, "See, this proves it." I just felt sick. I don't wish that on anyone. I told Mia that night out loud that we needed to pray for Lily by name. And we did. Mia didn't say much, but she nodded. But I couldn't shake the anger. Not at Lily, but at her mother. At Samantha's. So yes, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I found out which hospital Lily was at. And I went. I didn't barge in or show up unannounced. I called the front desk and asked to speak to Lily's mom, and she agreed to meet in the lobby. She looked tired. Older than before. But still had that same cold edge I remembered from the PT days. I told her everything. That Mia was being singled out. That this entire situation had turned into a circus. That her daughter's speech, whether intentional or not, made Mia a target. I told her she escalated everything. That she could have handled it privately. That our daughters were 12, and now mine was being bullied by kids who think they're protecting the cancer girl. She didn't flinch. She just said, "Now you know how my daughter felt. Alone. Mocked." And everyone told her to just move on. I asked her if this was revenge. She said, "It's not revenge, it's visibility." I told her I hope her daughter heals. That we truly do pray for her now. But I also said if she thinks this moral crusade helped anyone, she's wrong. She didn't answer. Just stood up and walked back towards the elevators. So that's where things stand. My daughter is now the one being whispered about. I'm being politely frozen out of school events. And everyone thinks Lily is some tragic figure, while my daughter is the wicked one who deserves to carry this forever. We're not changing our beliefs. We still think we handled things the way any sane, faith-guided family would. But if you think my daughter hasn't suffered, she has. And I still don't believe our family was meant to carry someone else's pain. Ada? Comments. Comment 1. YTA. And you've been building your own fire. You came here wanting sympathy. But what I see is a woman who threw gas on a small fire, and then stood back like it was a surprise when it turned into a blaze. Let's walk through this. Your daughter mocked a cancer patient not once, but in a group. You downplayed it. You wrote off the victim as dramatic and her mum as attention-seeking. You refused to let your daughter learn anything from it, except, don't get caught. Then you dragged your personal belief system into it, implying the kid's illness was punishment. And now you're shocked your daughter is the one being whispered about. You didn't want empathy. You wanted the situation buried. You didn't want forgiveness. You wanted control. Also confronting that girl's mother at the hospital, when she's facing the very real possibility of losing her kid's leg. Just to unload about how hard it's been for you. Holy hell. That's not just tone deaf, it's cruel. You're mad that a 12-year-old cancer patient didn't suffer quietly enough. Think about that. Comment 2. I'll say something that might get me downvoted. The mum Lily's mum did escalate this, but I think she was pushed there. You acted like she went nuclear for no reason, but from her perspective, her kid got mocked for having cancer. That's not teasing, that's serious, and your initial response came off cold as hell. That said, yeah, I think the school assembly speech was kind of a move. She didn't name names, but she knew it would ripple. It was a calculated way to apply social pressure. Does she deserve blame for the bullying your daughter is facing? Not exactly, kids connect dots. But she's not blameless either. You though? You created this climate. You refused a peaceful resolution. You told people privately you thought the girl was sick due to spiritual consequences. And then you basically declared yourself above guilt. You didn't just draw a line, you dug a trench and threw anyone who disagreed into it. And now your daughter's paying the price. She shouldn't be bullied, but this was a preventable spiral, and you lit the first match. Comment 3. Let me start by saying, I don't care if you're religious. Plenty of people believe in God without using his name as a shield for cruelty. But you took a sick kid's trauma, filtered it through your own spiritual logic, and use that as justification to disengage from responsibility. That's not faith, that's convenience dressed as righteousness. You claim diseases are sometimes consequences of brokenness or sin. Fine, that's your belief. But here's why you're the arsehole. You use that belief not to encourage compassion. This child needs prayer and love. But to create distance. Her suffering is not ours to carry. That's a moral cop-out. Also, let's not ignore that you confronted a mum at a hospital not to offer comfort or reconciliation, but to scold her while her kid might lose her leg. You went in with the energy of someone delivering a rebuttal, not compassion. You say, "We pray for her recovery now," like it's a checkbox item. But everything in your tone screams, "We pray for her, but we still think she was put in this situation for a reason." You didn't soften your beliefs, you just restated them with a nicer bow. Your daughter is becoming the emotional reflection of that worldview. Outwardly polished, inwardly dismissive of suffering she doesn't feel responsible for. And when the consequences boomerang, you cry unfair. You say you'll never change your stance. Fine. Just don't pretend it's holy. Update. It's been about 5 months since I last posted. I didn't intend to come back. I assumed the internet would forget me, and maybe it has. But I can't forget any of it, not what happened, not what I believed, and not what it turned into. We transferred Mia out of that school 3 weeks ago. That was never the plan. But at some point, you stop telling yourself it's just drama or people misjudging you, and start realizing the damage is real. Let me go back. Things got worse after the school assembly. Mia held it together for maybe another month, but the isolation wore her down fast. Teachers tried to stay neutral, but kids don't forget who gets whispered about. A few girls called her Mean Mia. One kid said, "I hope your mom gets cancer too." She told me about it only once. After that, she stopped talking. Then she snapped. It was a Tuesday. I got a call from the assistant principal. Mia had pushed a boy in the hallway. He'd made some bald Barbie joke behind her back. She turned around, screamed at him, and shoved him. No one was injured, but it was loud, public, and enough to get her suspended for 3 days. We grounded her. Took her phone. But something had shifted. Not in anger in her. She just shut down. Daniel finally admitted what I had been refusing to see. He told me we handled everything wrong. That we spent more time defending our image and our beliefs than actually helping our daughter become a decent human being. We fought that night. Hard. He told me he was ashamed we let religion become a shield instead of a compass. That hit deeper than anything. Because I knew he was right. I didn't know then that Mia had already reached out to Lily on her own. I found out later from Daniel that Mia had asked him to help her write something. A letter. She said it was private, just for Lily. She didn't want me involved. He sat with her at the dining room table and helped her put it together. She told Lily she was sorry not just for what she said, but for laughing while someone else said it. She told her she didn't understand what dying looked like until she saw what being alone did to a person. She signed it with her actual name. She said, "I was wrong. You didn't deserve what we did. I hope you don't think the world is full of people like me." Lily never wrote back. She couldn't. She passed away 2 weeks later. We got the email from the school counselor. It was sent to all parents. I found out after the fact that Mia had gone to the hospital 2 days before Lily died. She and Daniel. He didn't tell me until after the funeral. I asked why he hid it, and he said, "Because it wasn't about us. It was about her owning it. And I needed her to do that without your judgment." They sat with Samantha outside Lily's room. Daniel told me Samantha looked exhausted, but not angry. She said Lily wasn't fully responsive anymore, but could still hear. Mia stood by the bed, held her hand, and read the letter out loud. When she finished, she told her, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I needed to say it anyway. And I hope you don't feel so alone anymore." Samantha hugged her. They didn't talk long, but Mia got to say goodbye. I didn't go to the funeral. I told people I was out of town, but truthfully, I couldn't face it. A week later, I got a call from the worship leader at our church. She said there were concerns about some things I'd said in small group, specifically about Lily's illness. I wasn't kicked out, but the message was clear. People were distancing. One friend stopped inviting us to Bible study. Another unfollowed me on social media. I used to think we were being persecuted for our faith. But now I realize we were just wrong. About so many things. We changed churches in August. Found a place where the pastor talks about grace more than punishment. Where people ask questions, not just repeat doctrine. Mia is in therapy. Daniel goes with her sometimes. I sit in the car or walk around the block. I still struggle to talk openly with her. I don't know what to say without sounding like the woman I used to be, and I hate that version of me. We started over at a new school. No one knows the story. Mia keeps to herself mostly. No clubs, no birthday invites yet. But she's not being harassed. That's enough for now. I think about Lily almost every day. Not because I knew her well. I didn't. I kept my distance. I told myself her pain wasn't mine to carry. But my daughter, she carried it in the end. And thank God I didn't stop her. Thank God I didn't block her from saying goodbye, from trying to make it right, even if it was too late. I used to believe in spiritual cause and effect. That sickness and suffering were signs. Maybe I still do, a little. But now I believe the real sign, the one from God, wasn't the illness. It was the silence after. The guilt that settled like dust. The sound of my daughter crying through a closed door. The night Daniel said, "We have to stop protecting the wrong things." That was the consequence. And I felt it deep in my chest, where all the verses used to sit comfortably, unquestioned. This is the last time I'll write about this. But if anyone's reading and still justifying, still doubling down, just stop. You can believe in God and still believe in accountability. You can protect your faith without burying your heart. I couldn't give Lily her peace. But I'm thankful beyond words that Mia did. She needed to. And I needed to let her. Comments. Comment 1. I was one of the people who read your earlier post and walked away angry. Your whole tone then felt smug. But this update, it hit me in the gut. Not because I forgive the stuff you said about Lily, but because you didn't write this like someone trying to redeem themselves. You wrote it like someone who finally saw the wreckage. You lost control of the narrative. You lost the moral high ground. And instead of doubling down, you let your daughter lead you out. That matters. You were wrong. But you're not pretending otherwise. You're not asking for praise. You're not sugarcoating what your beliefs cost you and her. You let her go say goodbye. You didn't interfere. That's what saved this from being a total tragedy. I'm not religious, but I'll say this. There's nothing more spiritual than watching someone finally let go of the dogma that made them blind. Mia sounds like she still has a shot. Thanks to your husband. And honestly, thanks to you for getting out of the way when it counted. Comment 2. I read this with tears in my eyes. Not out of pity, out of frustration. Because none of this had to happen the way it did. A 12-year-old girl had to carry the guilt of mocking another kid on her deathbed. Another kid died. And you? You were out here preaching about spiritual consequences, while real consequences were steamrolling your daughter. You wanted to protect her. I get that. But you protected her from shame, not growth. And by the time you realized how badly she needed the second one, it was too damn late. Also, I want to say this as someone who's watched a child die from cancer. There is no such thing as a peaceful death at that age. There is no surrounded by love that makes it okay. Lily deserved more than some whispered apologies and a belated letter. She deserved dignity from the beginning. But your daughter gave her what you couldn't. She showed up. She owned it. That girl's got a soul. Protect that. Build around that. Because the damage is done. But the future's still wide open. Don't F this part up. Second story. The older guy I'm dating kissed me. And I imagined a life with him. He is already married and has a wife. Should I contact her? I'm pretty sure I already know what I need to do. I'm writing this so I can get all my feelings out about the situation and maybe get some reassurance from this community. So, to begin, I 27F am a bartender in a vacation town. A few weeks ago, I had a customer come in alone who was pretty shy at first. He was older than me. I would later find out he was in his 40s, and I thought he was really handsome. I chat up all my customers, but eventually it slowed down to a point where he was the only one in the bar for a bit. So we got talking and hit it off pretty fast. He explained he was in the area on a work trip. And while I don't want to give specifics that would identify him, I found his profession to be really endearing, as he told me he works with disabled children. We got to know each other throughout my shift, and he gave me his number before he left for the night. I texted him the following morning, and we got to chatting pretty regularly. He came in again during my next shift, and afterwards texted me to ask if I'd like to go grab drinks somewhere. Though I wanted to, I had a flight for a wedding the next morning, and I needed to pack after work, so I declined. A day or two after I returned from the wedding, he let me know he was back in the area for work and asked again if I'd like to meet up for drinks. This time I said yes, and after I got out of work one night, I met up with him. Our texting up until this point had been vaguely flirty, but neither of us had admitted outright yet that we were attracted to each other, so whether this was a date or not was unknown. I've also never been in a situation like this where I was interested in someone 15 plus years older than me. At some point during our time together, I asked him if he was divorced, since it was hard for me to believe that he'd never been married before at his age, looking the way he did. He told me yes, he'd been married and divorced before to a woman he'd been with for over a decade. He made no mention of being with anyone else currently, or being in any sort of open relationship. Throughout our time together, we got more flirty, and eventually I admitted that I hoped this was a date, and that I was attracted to him. He let me know the feeling was mutual, and at the end of the date I asked to kiss him, to which he said yes. We kissed, and he asked if I'd come back to his hotel room with him. Because I had class the next morning, I politely declined, even though I wanted to say yes. We ended up going our separate ways, and ever since that night have been texting almost every day. Our conversations got progressively more suggestive, and though it didn't turn into full as sexting, it got pretty close. I was becoming more and more interested in him, and really looking forward to the next time he'd be in my town, so I could finally take him up on his offer to join him at his hotel. I noticed that while he really seemed to enjoy texting me, he didn't ask me many questions about myself like I asked questions about him. He told me a little about his life and his dogs, and that the next time he'd be in my town, he'd be bringing them with him. Out of curiosity, I asked who watched his dogs while he was on his work trips. He said friends watched them. I mentioned that maybe I could come visit him in his town at some point since it wasn't too far away. That way he wouldn't have to drive to see me or arrange for his dogs to be taken care of while he was gone. His exact response: "We could certainly work on that." That's when I got the gut feeling that wouldn't go away. It literally kept me awake until I pulled out my phone and got to investigating. I didn't know his last name, but I knew his first and where he worked, so I Googled that. I found him pretty quickly, and once I learned his last name, I looked him up on Facebook. I found his profile almost immediately, along with, you guessed it, his wife's. I sat up in my bed and just stared for a few minutes. The pictures from their wedding were posted just a few days over a year ago, meaning he was texting me about all the places he wanted to kiss me during their first anniversary. There's a lot I have to be grateful for here. I never slept with him, and I found out who he really was after only a few weeks. Based on what he told me about his job, his childhood, and his love of dogs, I truly thought he was a sweet, honest guy. Usually I'm very good at picking up when people are lying, as I've been gaslit and manipulated in romantic relationships before. I know this is how every Reddit post of this nature goes, but with him, I really believed everything he said. It was only that one slip-up over text that gave him away. Now, I have his wife's Facebook account. I know I need to tell her. I was never looking for exclusivity with this man, as I honestly don't have the time for it. But I refuse to be the other woman. His wife deserves to know what's been going on. I know if I were her, I'd want to know. I've already started screenshotting my conversations with him for proof. I guess I'm posting on Reddit right now because I need assistance with the execution of it all. I really am not a malicious person, and if I feel any anger at all, it's on his wife's behalf. I don't want to destroy his life, mostly because that would probably just end up hurting her too. So Reddit, what's the best way to tell her that her husband has been stepping out on her with me? Comments. OP clarifies the timeline of the relationship of how she got to talk with the man. OP hi, I know I worded that weirdly, but it's not AI. Just a few days over a year ago, as in, it's only been a little over a year since they got married, and we were talking during what would have been their anniversary. Commenter 1. She definitely deserves to know that her husband is picking up women in bars. Just tell her, I think you should know that your husband is not being faithful. Then send her the screenshots of the texts and a brief explanation of how you met and how he invited you on dates and to his hotel room. Update me. Commenter 2. Never protect the cheater. His wife deserves to know. Send her receipts too. You both deserve better. Commenter 3. Yes. You should contact the wife. Tell her before you tell him so that he can't block you on her account. Send the screenshots and give her the option to decide how she wants to move forward. Don't tell him you told her. Just block him. He's definitely not in an open relationship, because if you're ethically non-monogamous, you'll tell your other partner. Update. Hi again. A few days ago, I posted asking for advice on how to tell an older man's wife that he was trying to cheat on her with me. Since then, I've received a lot of feedback, which I'm grateful for. Before I get into what I chose to do, I just wanted to clarify a few things. A lot of people took issue with the fact that I didn't know his last name after talking with him for a few weeks, and others thought I wanted to steal him from his wife. I guess I didn't explain well enough before, but I was never looking for an exclusive relationship with this man. School and work are my top priorities right now, and because of that, I simply don't have the time or emotional energy for a committed relationship. When I met him, all I was hoping for was something casual, especially since he didn't even live in the area. He could have been hooking up with other women while seeing me, And that truly wouldn't have bothered me as long as he was being honest about it and wearing protection. I didn't think to ask him his last name before the 3-week mark, because I really just hadn't made an emotional investment. But you all are right. If I'm going to get involved with someone romantically/sexually in any capacity, I should learn their last name much sooner, at least before I go out with them. One person also said to avoid tourists and people on business trips from here on out. And I agree, even in the casual sense, it's going to get messy. Like I said, if he'd been seeing other women, it would have been fine with me. Some of you said he might be in an open relationship, which I touched on in my first post. I don't think this is true, because the point of an open relationship is that you're open about it with both your partner and the other people you're seeing. He never mentioned being in one or having a wife at all, so even if he was, he still lied to me. So for the actual update, I told her. The question in my last post wasn't whether to tell her or not. It was how. Though I've lost sleep over this the last few days, I spoke with some of my close girlfriends, and they all said they'd want to know if they were the wife in this scenario. I decided to message the wife when he said he'd be at a doctor's appointment. I thought reaching out to her while she's alone and has time to process before seeing him would be best. I essentially explained the situation just like in my last post, with some extra details I left out here for anonymity's sake, so she'd know I wasn't lying. I apologized a lot, sent her screenshots of our conversations, and asked her that she not tell him that I gave her this information. If she went through his phone on her own like I suggested she should, then she'd be able to see the proof for herself, and hopefully she'd decide to just leave me out of it for my safety. I told her I'd leave our chat open for 24 hours if she wanted to talk or request more screenshots, and then I'd block her. At this point, I had already blocked the husband's number and his Facebook account too, just in case, even though we weren't friends. So 24 hours have passed, and no response. I'm not sure if Facebook allows you to read receipts for messages if you aren't friends, but I know the message was delivered. She has not responded, and so I've gone ahead and blocked her. Before I found out about his deception, the husband mentioned that he'd be in my town this week, and he knows which days I work. Hopefully this is the end of the story, and I never see either of them again. But if he decides to show up at my bar, then I will update if I'm still alive. Thank you all again for your feedback. P.S. to the guy who messaged me suggesting I could be the other woman in his marriage too. You're wild for that. Comments. OP clarifies the older man's posting on Facebook regarding the doctor's appointment. OP, no. He didn't put on Facebook that he'd be at a doctor's appointment. He told me that he'd be there prior to me finding out he had already a wife. Already had, because we were talking about the next time he'd be visiting my town. OP responds to a downvoted comment on how they met, if she didn't know his last name. OP. I didn't tell him where I worked. He happened to come into the bar I bartended at while I was working. And that's how we met. Commenter. You are exhausting. And I feel like every potential man you date should be required to read this entire post you wrote, and its update first, before they agree to go out with you. I think you need to be really upfront with the type of person you are. OP, honestly, this is great advice. If I could wear a big sign on my forehead that says, "Don't try to cheat on your wife with me," I'll tell her, on every date I go on. It would save me a lot of time, energy, and money. Commenter. If you messengered her and you're not friends, she'll only see it if she sees there's a message request. As for read receipts, if you looked at your message sent and a dot with her profile pic appeared at the bottom right, then she read it. I'm hoping you have some kind of support at the bar you work at should he come in and be angry. I'm sure you do. But definitely have a buddy with you when you leave if he doesn't appear for the time he's supposed to be around. Thank you for watching the video. If you are interested in listening to these kinds of stories, we've got more in store for you. Simply subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share it with your friends.